Theo, what am I in the eyes of most people?
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Well, this is a special episode really just based on thoughts that I was having following the last episode on resilience. What happens if we achieve resilience? What lies beyond that? Now, just to be clear, resilience is not a state of immaturity. It is not a state of dependence. It is a state of authority.
But how are we going to break out of that psychological bondage into self-responsible authority, courage for what our thoughts are in our life?
It's another way of saying, how do we begin to think for ourselves, but in an authentic way? Beyond resilience, for the super resilient, lies the hero's journey. It's not that you attain super resilience and then go on the hero's journey. The journey itself is heroic, and it's through the experience of this journey that super resilience is attained. By the way, merely the fact of being born into this world is heroic, but that's not enough. That's something that you sort of find yourself kind of born into that situation. Well done, thanks a lot, but what are you going to do with that?
All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
We see that story of resilience being attained through the experience of this journey in the story of the little hobbit, who basically makes a single courageous decision to step out of his door into the unknown. But in case it's not already clear, the psychological DNA of the process, the layers and levels of these various layers of life and of mastery are: firstly, brokenness and devastation. Secondly, resilience. Third, community or fellowship. Fourthly, the hero's journey. And fifthly, super resilience. And this is not a one-way trip. We return to this cycle again and again, learning and forgetting the lessons of life over a single lifetime. To the extent that we live with awareness, to the extent that we live consciously, well, we develop resilience. To the extent that we live courageously, we embark on the hero's journey. Perhaps once, perhaps several times, and this confers a kind of super resilience. Now, if that doesn't seem particularly compelling, think about what we're talking about as varying states of loneliness. Number 1, loneliness. 2, community. 3, loneliness. And it's cycling between all of those constantly as well. In The Lord of the Rings, the hobbit leaves his community, takes up the ring, which is an act of courage, and finds himself in a lonely predicament. His courageous act is respected by a higher fellowship than the community left behind, and soon he takes them, these fellows that he has in his company, his companions, to an even higher echelon of society, elven kings and queens, and so his existence goes up one level after the next. But then he learns a devastating truth. He must transcend even them, even his most powerful companions, and embark on the next leg of his journey, the hero's journey, alone. Even if he has the companionship of Sam, his most loyal companion, eventually even Sam is left behind, because only Frodo can carry the ring, and it's up to Frodo to bear it and to cast it away. Fiction is full of the varying versions of the hero's journey. Someone must do something that no one else can do, and return with a gift, a totem, a key, an insight, some magic, some answer to the problem of life, something that comes at great cost. Tony Stark as Iron Man does this by taking on Thanos with the support of a pantheon of other heroes. But in the end, he has to defeat Thanos on his own. He has to pay the ultimate price. Neo does this in the Matrix, but the key is that he has to go to the machine world alone. Maybe Trinity accompanies him, but the final step has to be taken by him and only him. Batman does this in Gotham, although he has the support of Robin, Alfred, and Inspector Gordon, and although driven by the memory of his parents, ultimately he has to go out there alone. He has to go and face the demons. It's his incorruptibility that is heroic, his conquest of his own fear that inspires others. In The Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit becomes a ring bearer, but he too transcends his companions, going further, demonstrating far more courage than anyone else. What do all of these stories have in common? Well, leaving others behind, leaving our former selves, our lower selves behind, growing, advancing, improving. Resilience, yes, resilience sort of comes along the way. Heroism, yes, but also the loneliness of the hero's journey. Part and parcel of the heroism is accepting the reality of loneliness. So you might look at someone like Thomas Crooks and say, wow, he's so pathetic, he's all on his own, there's no one around him. Well, that is part of the hero's journey. In fact, that is the first part of it. And it's certainly not the only way to judge a person is whether they're lonely or not. Some people who are at a very advanced stage of development are lonely as well, but not because they are rejected by others, but because they need to advance beyond others.
I know what it is you saw, for it is also in my mind.
Now, I know what you're thinking. You might say, well, fiction is all fine. But what about fact? What about a real life? Whose real life can we look to? Well, the story of Vincent van Gogh is also that story. It also starts off with loneliness. It also ends with loneliness.
Vincent's passionate belief was that people wouldn't just see his pictures, but feel the rush of life in them.
The rush of life. What if there was art that gave you a sense of being alive? Vincent van Gogh is lonely and he invites a friend, another artist, to live with him in the Yellow House. For a time things go well. They enjoy fellowship and revelry. They inspire one another. But then things deteriorate. There's disaster. He loses his ear. He almost bleeds to death. The artist is betrayed by his friend and kicked out of his home and the town where he lives. He ends up with nothing except who he is. Now he finds himself more lonely and devastated than he's ever been. And this is the ultimate test.
He's fidgeting to get going, to be somewhere else, to let all that inventive energy rip. What's happening is a miracle. He's translating mental upheaval into a revolution on the canvas.
He goes through many cycles of loneliness, many sort of periods where his work flourishes and then it flags. He enters the loneliness of an asylum where he faces the reality of his own mortality. And that's where he produces Starry Night, a painting that changes the world, a painting that communicates in a word what the one thing the world really needs, and the one thing that he really needs, consolation in the face of his own encroaching mortality. The irony of the Thomas Crookses of this world is that whether we experience ourselves utterly alone or not, whether we are heroes or villains, successes or failures, of one thing we can be certain: we come into the world alone, we experience seasons of loneliness on repeat, and we exit the world alone. We can't change that. The thing we can change is, what are we going to do with the time that has been given to us? Are we going to make something significant out of it? Are we going to take it for granted? Are we simply going to accept the status quo of what others say, who we are, and what our lives must be? Or do we take that mature, courageous step and be ourselves in this world?
Who am I? In the eyes of most people, a nobody, a non-entity, an unpleasant person, someone who has not and never will have any position in society.
Somebody who has no position in society and never will. In short, lowest of the low. All right then, well, even if that were all absolutely true, then one day I should like to show by my work.
My work, what this nobody, this non-entity, has in his heart.
What is so heroic about Vincent van Gogh's journey? Well, we see an individual, we see someone who has the courage to be himself, even despite being rejected, even despite being not accepted, not understood by society. He nevertheless has the courage to be himself.
And then to get out of that posture of dependency, psychological dependency, into one of psychological self-responsibility requires a death and resurrection. And that is the basic motif of the hero journey. The influence of a vital person vitalizes. There's no doubt about it. The world is a wasteland.
Joseph Campbell also said at one point, where we had thought to travel outwards, think about the hobbit going out of his front door into the world, where we had thought to travel outwards, we shall come to the center of our own existence, and where we had thought to be alone, we shall be with all the world. Loneliness may be devastating or part and parcel of the hero's journey, but whatever it is, you better get used to it. Even the most intimate of lovers find themselves alone, even within that most ecstatic of orgasmic embraces. Even the richest merchant finds he cannot take a single gold coin into the afterlife. So you see, loneliness is not as devastating when one realizes it's a default setting. It's always there. It's what you do with it that counts. And of course, there are different levels of loneliness. Loneliness with insignificance, loneliness without art, loneliness without meaning, and also loneliness with meaning, with significance, with mastery, with resilience. Vincent van Gogh provides an excellent portrait for finding the way out of almost total social death through sheer self-belief and effort, through work. And he succeeded. And not only does he succeeds in changing the whole world for the better. Joseph Campbell, who wrote The Hero with 1,000 Faces, also said, I don't believe people who are looking for the meaning of life as much as they are looking for the experience of being alive. And that is what we're all looking for. And so through Vincent van Gogh, we get a sense of what it means to be alive. Why? How? Because he is himself. And we can only get that experience of being alive when we are ourselves, authentically ourselves. Your fruit is the fruit of your own doing. You have no one to blame but yourself. Again, Joseph Campbell's words. A hero is someone who has given his or her life to something bigger than oneself. Again, his words. So in the end, the most heroic of all acts is the courage to be yourself on the grandest stage. That can only be achieved by letting go of the props and supports and ideas and suppositions of others and going it alone, making yourself the product of your own thoughts, your own ideas, standing apart, being your authentic self. And so Joseph Campbell, I'll end off with what he says. He says, we are not on our journey to save the world, but to save ourselves. But in doing that, you save the world. The influence of a vital person vitalizes. Vincent van Gogh was a vital person. And one way to test this whole question is, are you alive right now? Do you feel alive right now? How alive do you feel right now? Do you think you should be feeling more alive right now? And if you do, and if you take up that challenge, your vitality will inspire others to engage with their own vitality. And what that then does is it brings the whole world online. It makes the whole world a place of vitality, a place of life, a place worth living in. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.